Good morning. I'm Bernadette Thompson, and this is How I Made It Through podcast. My guest today is Stephen Panus, and Stephen has a story of loss and grief, losing his son at a very tender age of 16. And I want to share a little bit about Stephen before we get started. So let me just read a little about Stephen. Stephen Panus is a storyteller at heart, one driven by purpose, resilience, and the unwavering belief that we can turn pain into positive change. As the author of the best-selling book, Walk On, he shares his deeply personal journey following the tragic loss of his son, Jake, who was tragically and suddenly killed as a passenger in a reckless and senseless car crash at the tender age of 16 in the summer of 2020. Through telling his story, Stephen inspires others to find strength, meaning, and hope in life's most difficult moments. Walk On was honored as Good Morning America's Book Club Buzz section, and its impact extends far beyond the pages. Proceeds from the book support the Jake Panus Walk On Scholarship, which helps Native American youth pursue higher education, a cause close to Jake's heart and a powerful way to continue his legacy, as well as walk on student athletes at the University of South Carolina and disadvantaged inner city youth from Bridgeport, Connecticut. Welcome, Stephen. I'm so glad you're here. You know, always the deepest sympathies when I talk with somebody who has lost a child. I have experienced losing a spouse, and that is challenging, but the loss of a child is something that goes so deep into our hearts. And so I'm grateful that you are here to share not only about Jake, but about the book Walk On that you've written about him.
Thanks for having me on, Bernadette.
Yeah, I would love it if you would take us back. I know it can be painful at times, but I would love it if you would just take us back and tell us a little bit about one, not only what about Jake's passing, but maybe a little bit about Jake and then some more about his passing.
Yes, so Jake was an incredible young man. He was unique from the get-go. He was born with a full head of hair, curly hair. We called it the blonde afro. He's very angelic looking, a little cherub, but he was different in the sense that by age 5, he was capable of holding adult conversations, looking adults in the eye. We took him everywhere, being our firstborn. And we would sit back, my wife Kelly and I would just stand back sometimes in a room and stand in awe and watch him handle himself with complete composure as a 5-year-old in a room full of adults. And it was something to behold. And it was Jake. He was naturally authentic. He was a magnificent personality, larger than life type of person who walks into a room and the room gets a lot brighter instantly. You knew he was there either because you visually saw him or because you felt his electric and palpable energy, which bounced off the walls. Jake loved life. He was an athlete, played football and lacrosse at his high school. But his special superpowers, Bernadette, were that he had this innate ability to lift up others and to spread joy everywhere he went. He just made people feel better about themselves. He made people feel included. He had friends in every different age group you could have. He lived in every time zone, so he had friends spanning from the West Coast to the East Coast, and was just a really unique kid. He was 16 years old. It was the summer of 2020, and he was invited to go on a weekend getaway with his girlfriend and her family. He had been dating her only about 5 weeks. She was a year older. She was about to turn 17, and they went to Block Island, which is a small, tiny island off the coast of Rhode Island, a summer destination for a lot of people on the East Coast. And they left on Friday morning, August 7th. And the mom of the girlfriend had promised us it would be safe family fun, that she would be watching the children. Final words that she texted Kelly were, "Nothing to worry about. I'll be watching the kids." 2 days later, on Sunday, August 9th. My wife and I returned from a bike ride, and her phone rang. It's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was the mother of the girlfriend. And she informed Kelly there had been an accident. Jake was injured. She had no other details. She wasn't at the scene. We quickly grabbed Liam. Kelly packed an overnight bag, and we sprinted to our car and began to drive towards Rhode Island. And as I reflect back now, I do recall that I felt like he maybe broke his arm or his collarbone or a rib or something happened, and we didn't even know where or how it happened. So I was like, your mind's racing, like, did he fall off a bike? Did he get hurt at the beach? You just have no idea, but I never thought it was the worst case scenario. We were 12 minutes into the drive when my wife's phone rang again. It was connected to the car speaker system. Liam was in the back seat, pretty much falling forward into the front seat. And my wife answered. It was a doctor from Rhode Island. He introduced himself, and then he paused and said, "I'm sorry, I just pronounced your son dead." And as you can imagine, everything went black, and our life blew up in that moment, indelibly altered in the most profound way possible. It's been absolutely soul-crushing for our family. On every level. It's changed almost everything in our lives. And we're 4 years and 8 months out, and it still feels like yesterday some days.
Stephen, I know that is so hard to share, and I'm grateful that you were able to do that. It is grief is one of those things that when it particularly shocking grief that comes in a moment that completely unexpected, that it is so difficult for the body to make that to feel that, and for the mind to understand that someone that you loved is no longer here. It is such a challenging. Tell me more about. There are some special things. Well, there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about, because I know there's some special things about Jake, and some things that he had shared with you during his lifetime that makes you think that there's still a connection with him now. But also, maybe just talking a little bit more about the grief, because it's one of the things, as you have written in the book, and grief is it's just not talked about, and people are so uncomfortable with it. And it's one of the things that, in order to heal, we have to go through this process. And so I would just even share about his memorial service, or what happened after he crossed.
Yeah, grief is an individual journey. No matter how it happens or when it happens, we all handle it differently. Men and women cope differently, and process feelings differently and emotions. And so it's been challenging, because Kelly and Liam and I have each kind of handled it our own different way. We've supported one another, but there's certainly moments where you're just you're not in the same railroad tracks, and it's not a linear pathway, which makes it even harder. It's not like you've broken your back and the doctor says, well, in 4 to 6 months you're going to be 100% again.
Right.
This is a life sentence, losing a child. There's part of me that died that day with Jake. There's part of Jake that remains with me, thankfully. And sudden death like that is incredibly traumatic. It's damaged my brain, I'm certain. I'm just not the same person I was before. It's sucked energy out of me. I don't have the same energy levels that I once had. It takes a lot out of you. It's hard to put into words. And people, you're right, people are very intimidated and scared about not just grief, but death in Western society.
Mhm.
because we don't talk about it, and it becomes this very fearful thing,
Mhm.
stigmatized. Nobody wants to get close to it for fear that
Mhm.
they attract it. Yet we're all actually dying as we talk, right? We're getting one day closer to
Mhm.
our end, whenever that does come. And if we would honor that and acknowledge that, I think we'd be a much kinder society to one another. We're all here to love one another and lift each other up. And
Mhm.
uh,
Well, I agree. I agree with you, and it is one of my goals since losing my husband David, is to open this up, open this discussion up, and know that there is more. That our passing is not limited to just leaving this earth and nothing else. That and it's a discussion. It's what we have talked about. But tell me a little bit about his memorial service. It was a beautiful service, wasn't it?
yeah, I mean, as much as I can remember, it was a blur for me, honestly. But we had a service 1 week after Jake passed at our church. Again, it was during COVID, so there was limited inside seating.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but there were crowds outside the church, in the back parking lot, in the front parking lot, down the street at the library.
Yeah.
Um, and then it was streamed, so there was a lot of people watching
Yeah.
um, the streaming of it. It was a surreal moment. You can't believe you're actually sitting there, and
Yeah.
um, that your
But
son is gone.
yeah, but Jake brought that crowd in. He brought that crowd in because of the incredible being that he was. That as you described him in the beginning, how he shined, across the country, had friends in all.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about your connection with Jake now, and also tell me a little bit about some of the things that he shared during his lifetime that made you uh, uh, curious about, since he has passed. You've shared a little bit, so I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Yeah, we have received a lot of different signs from Jake since he passed. Some of the earliest signs were a sun dog. He's delivered 5 of those to us in less than 5 years, and that is a big circle of light up in the sky, surrounding the sun, and at the edge of the outer rim of the light is a rainbow. Um, it's immense. It's huge. I'd never seen one before Jake passed. And like I said, we've seen 5 of them now. They've occurred on momentous days. Um, and when Jake was alive, when we lived out west in Las Vegas, he was 3 years old. He was in a Montessori school, and he began telling his classmates and teachers that he had a sister. And we didn't have a daughter then, and he was pretty adamant about it. Both grandmothers were a little concerned with his creative imagination, you might say. But Jake was adamant that he had a sister. And life moved on, and he grew up. But a year before he died, he took a mission trip out to South Dakota, Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, to aid and assist the children from Red Shirt Table out there, a very poor part of a poor reservation, helping them with life skills, reading, math, having fun with them. And Jake loved it. He had a great time out there. And after he returned home from that experience, he was transformed. He wanted to make a difference. He saw the inequalities that existed between how they were living out there and how he was living back in Connecticut. He was upset by the disparity and wanted to do something about it. And he also apparently told an older friend who was, I think Jake was a freshman, so this boy was a junior, that he had a sister. I found out through the boy's dad, who asked me weeks later, just said, "Hey, were you and Kelly married previously, and then you guys got together and kind of combined the families like the Brady Bunch?" And I said, "No, why do you say that?" And he said, "Well, because Jake was telling my son that he had a sister." So here he was at age 15, still telling us that he had a sister, telling everyone. And I came home, I told Kelly that. We just kind of chuckled. We're like, "That's Jake, right?" Well, after Jake died, about 6 months in, my wife said, when the time is right, Jake is going to send someone to us. I know it. And I believed her. And it was February. Well, I put the word out, and she had asked me to put the word out to our minister at our church and let her know that if they ever heard of a child in need of love and a home, to give us a call. And that was in the fall of 2022. In February 23, we went away for a getaway to get away from the cold winter and to just find some peace. And we went to Barbuda and Antigua. And we had just landed in Barbuda when my phone buzzed. And it was our minister. And the text read essentially that there was a young girl who was in need of a home. She had been homeless since October. She attended a school down the road from us, 2 minutes away from our house, had gotten herself a scholarship into that school. She came from a tough, rough upbringing and was about to be placed into the foster system. Would we be interested in having her live with us? And I immediately wrote yes. And then I went and showed Kelly. And so Kelly started talking to the different social workers involved in the case while we were away. And we returned home thinking there's a 75% chance that she may come to us in a week or 10 days. We weren't totally sure, but we felt fairly optimistic. We also hadn't talked to Liam about it yet to gauge whether he was interested or not. Again, we were all still pretty much hurting and dealing with our grief in a variety of different ways. We certainly sought out therapy. And we arrived home and we tackled Jake's room. We hadn't touched it. It had sat just like he left it. So that was a very painful and difficult process to do. And we kind of transformed it as best we could with what we had into a room that could at least offer a girl some level of comfort. It was painted blue, but we transformed it as best we could. And we got a phone call that day that they're going to bring her over at 8:00 that night. And so we quickly went for a walk with Liam and explained that what was going on, and there was this possibility that this girl could be coming to us. Is that something you're interested in, or would you find it hard and you're not interested in having, a young sister living with us? And he immediately said, no, she can come live with us. I want that. So April arrived to us that night with social workers, and she was listening to the social workers have a conversation with us. We were signing all the paperwork, and she heard the social workers say goodbye to us. Goodbye, Mr. and Mrs. Panus. And I took April upstairs to show her bedroom. She had a backpack. That's all she had for her worldly belongings. And she looked around and she said, I said, you can make yourself totally at home. The dresser drawers are completely empty. So, unpack as you wish. And she stopped and asked a really good question. She said, well, how long am I going to be here? Which is a real fair question to ask under the circumstances. And I just told her, I said, you're here as long as you want to be here. Our door is open to you. And Kelly came up and they started talking, and she asked Kelly, whose room is this? And Kelly said, well, it's our son's room. He died and nearly 3 years ago. And she said, April said, what was his name? And Kelly said, Jake. And April said, Jake Panus? I had heard of him. And that was a little surreal to hear, that she came from 30 minutes away, different town, whatnot. And she had heard of Jake, but that wasn't surprising because Jake was a big personality who knew a lot of people, and he got around, and he played travel sports. So he knew kids from other communities. And April reminds us of Jake. She's got curly hair. Jake had the curly hair. She's a lefty. Jake is a lefty. And over the course of having April live with us and become our daughter, she has said and done things that compel Kelly and I to look at each other and be like, can you believe she just did that? It's exactly what Jake would have done, or the mannerisms are the same. And she brings up things that we're thinking before we say it, much like Jake. And I found a picture after April arrived to us that Jake drew when he was about 5 years old, and it was a family picture. And in it, he drew his sister, and it turns out she looks just like just like April, and she's holding Liam's hand of all things in the picture. And I showed April that picture, and told her the story of Jake always saying he had a sister. And her response was awesome. She said, "Oh my God, I was manifested." And we do believe that Jake sent us his sister. It not only saved Kelly's life, but it saved April's life. So we each help each other. And it's been absolutely seamless to have April come into our family. She's an amazing young woman who has since gone on to graduate from high school. She's on a full academic scholarship at Bucknell University in Pennsylvania. She's incredibly driven to succeed. She's overcome really tough circumstances and a lot of life adversity that would knock most people down and out. And she's refused to let any of it stop her. We feel blessed and have immense gratitude to have April in our lives as our daughter.
It's an incredible story, Stephen. I mean, this journey that you've been on, that Jake has taken you on, is just amazing. And you know, I know and believe in our connection, our spiritual being connection with the other side. And Jake is such a strong spiritual being that sometimes there are indications, you know, I've heard other stories, and I'll share one in just a moment, but about people that kind of know things that they shouldn't know ahead of time. And it sounds like Jake certainly had that, that he carried that into this lifetime, that maybe he was going to leave early and that he had a sister coming in, which, you know, was just amazing. You were also telling me the day that he left to go on this trip that he said something amazing.
Yeah, I write about that in my book, Walk On. So we had lost power that week. And we initially said that Jake couldn't go on the trip with his girlfriend. They just, like I said, just started dating. We thought it was a little early, and for him to be going away. We lost power due to a microburst storm came through our town and took out trees and power lines. And it was hot. It was August. And we had been without power since Tuesday. And so we decided, I think on Wednesday or Thursday, that we're like, okay, we relented. Jake was pretty persuasive anyway, but we finally said, okay, you can go. We don't have power. Why make you stay here and suffer when you can go and enjoy a weekend? So we huddled to see him off on that Friday morning. It was about 7:30 in the morning. We're all in our pajamas except for Jake, and we're waiting for his girlfriend to come pick him up, her family. And when her car pulled up, we all hugged Jake goodbye. And he literally, his last words were, he stopped and looked at us and said, "Y'all are acting like you'll never see me again." And he walked down the driveway and flashed his signature peace sign, looked back at us one more time, and got in the car and left. That was the last time I saw my son.
Yeah. It's an incredibly powerful story. And it reminds me of, there is a book called Wolf's Message, and Suzanne Giesemann, and she is a medium, but she is very well known and comes from a very almost like scientific kind of background. This was not a woman that grew up, and she met this family who lost their son, and he had left some signs that he almost knew that he was not going to be here, that he was going to leave early. And you know, I think about, sometimes we talk about our soul contract coming here, you know, down, and that it's kind of decided. I don't know that it's, you know, there's how much it's decided, but that there is this, before we come, that we kind of know what we're going to do in this lifetime. And I feel that Jake is such a was a powerful spirit on this earth for the amount of time that he was here, and that he also seemed to have some almost some knowledge that he wasn't going to stay for what you would have hoped was a full lifetime. Does his spirit feel strong to you now?
Oh yeah. Yeah, his Jake had like I said, a natural light when he was here, and that light and the luminosity of it still shines pretty brightly.
Yeah. Do you feel like he talks to you? Do you you know, like in daily, like, do you get signs, see his birthday number, or things like that around? Or
We get plenty of signs. I wouldn't say it's daily. I certainly wish it was, but it's enough and he communicates through a variety of different ways.
Mhm.
Lights, sounds, music, numbers, signs on passing vehicles,
Uh-huh.
things that aren't coincidences occurring. I believe there are
Mhm.
no coincidences, but it's pretty crazy the amount that have occurred and the frequency where it's left us with our jaws kind of just on the ground, kind of like, wow.
Mhm. Well, his biggest sign is April,
No
whom he
doubt.
brought into
Yeah.
your life, which is amazing. And did she feel a connection with him? Does April feel a connection with
I've
Jake? I mean,
never really, that's a good question. I don't think I've ever really asked her that.
Mhm.
I know that she feels a connection to us
Yeah.
as much as we feel a connection to her, and that means everything. Um, we don't use the word foster. She is our daughter, and I'm her
Yeah.
father, and Kel's her mother, and um, we just have gratitude for her being in our lives, and um, she's changed the energy in our house, which is what
Mhm.
Jake always did. Jake's energy was huge. And when April, she's in college now, but when she comes back home, the energy in the house immediately changes in a very good, positive way.
Mhm.
Um, so there's no doubt that they had a connection. There's so many similarities between April and Jake, um, and I think Jake knew exactly what his mother needed, um, and he made sure she got it.
Mhm. Well, it is an amazing connection that he had with April, that she came. But also, as you said, that he knew what his mother needed. And he started preparing Kelly from a young age, saying to her, you're going to have a daughter. You're going to have a daughter,
Hmm.
in a way that, it is so true, because children, often will say things, and it's not always easily believable. And there is that moment where you want to say, well, we really need to tell them to stop saying that. Um, but
Yeah,
that Jake continued to uh, share that and it is said in our spirit, like, children do often have a greater connection to the spirit side, to our, to heaven, because they are so young. They have just come from there. Uh,
yeah, I totally
and that,
believe that. 'Cause when I was about 8 or 9 years old, I had a for lack of a better phrase, a voice say to
mhm.
me that something bad is going to happen to you in your early 50s. And so I lived my life thinking I was going to die in my
Wow.
early 50s. And instead, I was 51 when this accident happened. And instead, it was my son, my firstborn,
Mhm.
was going to die.
Yeah.
And a year before Jake died, that same voice, if you will, spirit, the sense came over me and said, this doesn't have a happy ending. And I remember sharing that with Kelly. And as I thought about it, I knew that it applied to Jake. I didn't know what it meant totally. I thought, oh, okay, is he going to do something stupid and foolish as a 16-year-old and get arrested? And um, hurt his
Yeah.
chance to go to the college he wanted to go to, or something like that. I obviously never thought the worst case scenario. What parent wants to think that?
Yeah.
But it didn't have a happy ending.
Yeah. Stephen, it it's you are very spiritually connected. Obviously, Jake was very spiritually connected, and to as part of your grief journey, trying to move through grief, there this understanding that Jake is so still with you, and that somehow there was this, as I was saying, somehow we sometimes agree before we come here to experience challenging things. And I have a dear friend who is also is a medium, and she lost her son at age 7 to he was sick, had the flu, and passed away during that time. And he came to her after, and she ended up becoming this medium. But she was having this conversation with him from across the veil, and he said to her, "You agreed to this." And there's something in our spirit that, when we're going through these difficult times, that that challenges are there to raise us and to help us, you know, raise our consciousness, and to understand that there's more than just the 3D world that we're living in. And it often comes with such deep, deep pain. But I think the journey that you and Kelly have been on, bringing April into your lives, and Liam bringing April into your lives, is an amazing um, uh, way of answering that call that you came to. Somehow that came to you. So it's truly an amazing story.
I
And
remember.
go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead. No, you go
No,
ahead, Bernadette.
no, I was just going to start talking about the organization that I had mentioned to you, Helping Parents Heal. But what were you going to say first? And we can talk about
I
that
was going to
after.
say that in the months after Jake passed, I remember I had someone tell me that I should be grateful that Jake had been in my life. And at first that landed kind of flat as a
Mm-hmm.
grieving parent. I was really in a dark, dark place. And that's the last thing you really want to hear in that time.
Mm-hmm.
But around a year or so later, I was sitting outside just looking up at the clouds. And I thought, what if Jake had never been in my life?
Yeah.
And I realized that, yeah, I do have gratitude that I had 16 years with him. It certainly wasn't enough, but that's all I got. And I had gratitude for that because he made me such a better person.
Yeah. And you and I have talked about this organization called Helping Parents Heal. It is it's an amazing group of parents. It was started with parents who had lost children, and it's a national. I think it even might be an international organization that offers so much help to parents to help them through this challenge. And they're very they vet mediums that do connect with the other side to help parents have that connection and to hear from their child, and know that they are safe, and on the other side and still in their lives. And the amazing stories, there are so many Jake stories from people who are associated with this organization. And Jake continues to live on because not only did he bring April in, but he encouraged you to write his story. Tell me a little bit about Jake's book that you have written.
Yeah, so the title is Walk On, and it has multiple meanings. Obviously, we named 2 scholarships that we started in Jake's honor to make sure his legacy of lifting up others endures. forever. The first is out at Red Cloud Indian School and Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, and we've awarded 3 young Lakota girls with scholarships to date. And the second is at the University of South Carolina, where Jake wanted to go to college, following my footsteps. And so far, 4 student athletes, football players, have been awarded scholarships there. So each one of them now carries a part of Jake with them, which is, again, so meaningful to a bereaved parent. I stay in touch with these kids. I attempt to mentor them as much as they're willing to let me. And they're awesome. They all have bright futures, and they have a responsibility now of carrying the baton and helping others down the road, and carrying part of Jake with them. And the book I wrote because I started to write a goodbye letter to Jake. I had to put my feelings somewhere. I realized it was not going to serve me well to keep them bottled up. I had anger and rage against our circumstances. I felt violated. I was hurting badly. And so I started to write a goodbye letter to Jake, and that was hard and painful. And I would stop and start often. And then one day I looked at his little brother, Liam, who was 11. And I thought, I'm 52 now. I'm struggling. How is an 11-year-old boy supposed to process and cope with losing his beloved older brother? So I asked Liam to grab his buck knife and meet me outside. And he ran up to his room and got it and came out. And we walked across our property over to an old mature tree. And I said, Liam, carve off a swath of bark off that tree. And he did. He kind of carved off a rectangle shape. And he looked at me and he said, now what, Dad? And I said, now we're going to watch this tree heal. It's going to grow new bark. It's going to look different. It's going to feel different. It may not fully grow over the whole space, but it's going to get over most of it. And just like this tree, we're going to do the same. Our hearts are going to find a way to mend. We're never going to be the same. I'm not going to lie to you. But we are going to find a way to walk on in our lives and honor Jake and live and find joy again. And I wanted Liam not only to believe in me as his dad, but I wanted him to believe in himself and in the process, and that it would take time. And in doing that, I also started to reflect on these messages that I had written to my boys every morning. It started when Jake was about 5 years old and old enough to read. I began writing him morning inspirational messages. And they were focused on character traits and values that I deemed incredibly important, non-negotiable in many respects. And it continued with his brother Liam. Jake would read them to Liam, and when Liam was old enough to read, he began partaking in the process fully. And I had to revisit all those quotes and messages, things I modeled as truth, to my boys, and find truth, rediscover whether there was veracity in them. And in doing that, I realized I could write something about this and about the process of grief intermingled with it, and how it could help Liam. I dedicated the book to Liam. I wanted it to help Liam. But I thought when I finished writing, maybe this can help more than just Liam. And so I never thought I was writing a book when I was writing. I was just writing. And I sent out some letters with book pitches to some publishers, and lo and behold, several were interested. And the book got published last April. And as you mentioned, it's been really well received. It's helping others, which is what it's about. The proceeds from the book sales support the scholarship. So it's a win-win for everybody. And Walk On means, different things. At South Carolina, a walk-on athlete is a student athlete who is not on scholarship and is trying to earn a scholarship. They tend to be the underlooked or overlooked, the underrated, the gritty, the tough kids who just weren't, maybe they just didn't play in a big enough school or team, or maybe they developed later and were growing in college rather than high school. And those kids represented a lot of what Jake represented. And so that was part of it. And then just I had to walk on, and our family had to walk on. We had to find a way to walk on in our lives. And then the third kind of meaning of it was the Lakotas told us that walk on has a different meaning for them. And they believe that when we die, that death is not an end point of a linear pathway, that they believe you walk on to the next step of your journey. And it was kind of like when they told Liam and I that when we were out there for the first graduation ceremony, it was like the universe brought it all together. And it's taken on a life of its own. Walk On for Jake has become a kind of a mantra. We have T-shirts and there's hats that his friends wear, and I think we're all walking on, because again, everyone suffers. Grief is universal. We no escaping it. We're all going to deal with some form of grief, and it's not always the death of a loved one. It could be the end of a marriage. It could be a financial struggle. You could lose your home to a wildfire. You could be diagnosed with a poor medical condition. There's just so many forms and degrees of grief. And certainly some are more traumatic than others, but we all suffer, and we all have to find a way to walk on in our lives.
Well, Stephen, that is absolutely beautiful what you just shared. It was really powerful how you described all the parts of what walk on means. And, it is such it's an honor to have you here with me, just being able to, that you've been able to share this, and very grateful. I feel Jake's spirit. I feel like he is standing behind you, with you in every step that you are taking. And I believe that your message is so important. The beginning parts, just even when we were talking earlier, it's painful for you to share some of this. It is, I know how hard this is, and yet you just spoke with such grace and with such wisdom in sharing what walk on means to you. So I'm hoping, I want to put that up there. I want to put your website up here so that people know that they can connect with you, and know all of the things that you're doing in Jake's honor, and how you're helping your family to move forward. Is there anything else you'd want to share? Is there any kind of message that you want to leave people with?
Yeah, well, I do. One is that what I've learned in this process is that our vulnerability is our strength. Again, we often don't want to be vulnerable when things like this happen to us. We want to sweep it under the rug. We want to, push it down. We want to ignore it. But the reality is, you can't hide it. Grief will find you. It's my shadow. It will forever be my shadow. And you need to work your way through it. The Lakotas revere the bison. And one of the reasons is it's the only known animal who instinctively knows when the storm comes, to turn, face the storm, and go through it directly. It's the shortest pathway.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lesson for us humans in that, and that we need to face our storms. And it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to ask for help. I needed a lot of help, and I wasn't afraid to ask. And I recognize and honor it's a little bit more challenging for men. We're taught the opposite. We're taught not to cry. We're taught to dust yourself off and get back up on the horse, right? And get it back into life. But when you lose a child, especially traumatically, you don't just cry, you weep until your bones rattle, and you are indelibly changed. And it takes a lot more than just dusting yourself off to get back in life.
Well, thank you, Stephen, for being here. And I look forward to supporting you and your mission any way that I can. So, but thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernadette.